Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, my name's Olivia and I'm an independent game developer and artist. And something I've never really talked about before is I actually really like Pokemon. Yeah, it's kind of something that I don't really advertise or put out there. It's a little embarrassing. Pokemon is really important to me. It shaped my career in a lot of ways. It's my favorite game series of all time. Naturally, I was really looking forward to the 30th anniversary of the first games, which just passed during this last week. And I wanted to celebrate the occasion by making a little piece of tribute art. So this is the art piece I ended up making. It's super cute. It depicts one of my favorite, most special childhood memories of playing Pokemon. And so this video is going to be me sort of walking you through the process of how I created this illustration, while also telling you the story behind it, because I don't know, it's a really sweet, special story to me, and I've wanted to share it in some form for a while now. So I hope you enjoy watching my process of creating a 3D illustration, and also enjoy listening to my story. Yeah, let's get started with the video. So the first step for me when creating any sort of artwork or illustration is to get all of my references together so that I don't have to be stopping later to gather them. So the first thing I'm doing here, you can see I have got my original Game Boy SP and my original copy of Pokémon Yellow. And for the illustration, I wanted to get a reference of my hands, like holding the consoles. And then because I wanted to draw the sprites from the game for the little painting, I needed to gather some images from Sprite resource. I also just gathered some art of Mew just to refresh myself on how to draw Mew. Once I made this little mood board, I got my Holbein acrylic gouache paints and I did some sketches in my sketchbook. I drew a little grid of the little map area that I wanted to draw, and then I got into painting. Now you're seeing me painting the little scene from Pokemon, and I'm gonna start telling you my story. So I want to start my story with how Pokemon entered my life exactly, because weirdly, even though it's been so insanely popular for 3 decades now, I wasn't exactly indoctrinated into it. I actually wasn't overly exposed to it as a kid, and my love for it, it grew very organically, I'd say. I was born in 1996, so I'm the same age as Pokemon, although I'm not 30 yet. When I was little, I vaguely knew what it was, but I didn't have any way to access it. I didn't know when it was on TV or what channel. I didn't have any friends who were into it that I knew of, and I didn't have any Nintendo consoles. We had a PlayStation, but no Nintendo, not even a Game Boy. I knew I liked Pikachu, and I knew vaguely about the anime. I'd seen a couple episodes, but that's where my knowledge pretty much ended. And then in, I believe it was 2005, my cousin got a Nintendo DS, and he gave me his silver Game Boy Advance SP as a hand-me-down. And let me tell you, this moment was just, it was huge for me. I'd seen said Game Boy a couple years earlier when he first got it, and I think I'd thought about it every day since then. I just loved it. I loved the cute little clamshell design. I loved that it was silver. I loved that it was so tiny. I loved that you could just play like a video game wherever you want. I wanted one so bad, but my parents wouldn't get me one. So when my cousin gave me his, like, needless to say, I was completely over the moon. I can still remember before I had any games for it, I'd turn it on at nighttime, lying in bed and just admiring the little title screen and just thinking about how exciting my life was going to be now that I have a Game Boy Advance SP. Anyway, so there were these kids who would sometimes be visiting their relatives in the house next door to ours, and on one of these holidays, the older kid saw that I now had a Game Boy, and he gave me a handful of his old games, which was actually so nice of him now that I think about it. I hope that guy's doing well. But one of these games was a mysterious chunky yellow cartridge, and it had the sticker scratched off, so I didn't know what it was. So I put the game into my console, and I was greeted by my acquaintance Pikachu. That game was Pokémon Yellow, and this was my first ever exposure to RPGs. No, actually no, that kid also gave me his copy of Golden Sun. But like, whatever, it's Pokemon Day, it's not Golden Sun Day. Just a quick break from my story. Now what I'm doing in the art process is I finished my painting and now I'm moving on to the program Paint 3D, and I'm using it with my Wacom One drawing tablet to trace over the images, the sketches I did of my hands and of Mew. I'm using it to create the organic shapes for the 3D part of the illustration, and then I'm going to use Blender later to do the inorganic shape, the Game Boy. So yeah, back to my story. So this kid gave me his copy of Pokémon Yellow, and the save file, it had a save file on it, and it was up to Cerulean City. I wasn't sure what to do or how to play the game because I'd never seen it before in my life. But, you know, I was a kid, I was like 8 or 9, and I didn't exactly have a lot of other things to do. So I would just load up the game and start walking around in it. And eventually through just messing around, I kind of figured out how to proceed. And then I started really exploring Kanto, and I figured out what gym badges were and how to get them. I learned what HMs are and how to use them. I learned how to evolve Pokemon. I learned what the Pokedex was and how to use it to find new Pokemon. And before I knew it, I was just completely enamored with this game. I can remember, I think I was a bit confused because that game was pretty old, even by then, like at that point. And the graphics were so simple compared to the other games I had. Just through the gameplay and the world building alone, I was just completely captivated. And I would just binge this game, binge the hell out of it. I was just so eager to see more. I loved exploring every nook and cranny of the game. I loved talking to every NPC and giving them a little backstory in my head. I was obsessed with completing the Pokedex. Like, I was so determined to do that. I remember the light bulb moment when I realized that maybe if I bought a drink at the Celadon City shopping center and gave it to the guard, then maybe he would let me into Saffron City, and I was like amazed at my big brain when that actually worked. I remember, and this is so funny to think about now, but when I got up to the secret rocket base in the game corner, I thought I'd discovered a legitimate secret that the world needed to know about. And, you know, not like a mandatory part of the game. So I promptly hopped onto the family computer and went on GameFAQs or something like that. And I went to the Pokemon Yellow page, like the glitches page, and I submitted my findings. And my post did not get approved. But I mean, like, it's funny, like that really goes to show just how sheltered my Pokemon experience was. Because if I had any other friends who were playing the game, they probably would have just humbled me a bit, but I was just completely in my own world with this game. You know, all these discoveries I made in it, I made them without any external input. I didn't have any friends who'd played the game. I didn't have guidebooks. The internet wasn't super accessible yet. I hadn't even seen much of the anime. Pokemon Yellow, it's hard to describe, but it's a game that it made me feel smart in a way that no game had before, and I didn't feel smart often as a kid. And I think that's part of the reason why this game was like so intoxicating. It was really good for my brain, I think, as a kid, because the whole game was like a puzzle for me. Like there was so much to figure out and so much to overcome. And the only way to do it was through observation and curiosity. You know, with all the games I'd played before, how good you were, it really depended on dexterity. But yeah, Pokemon was different. It was the first game that made me feel smart, and I loved it for that. And all of these feelings and love growing for Pokemon, it all accumulated into the moment which this art piece depicts. But just stopping my story for a second to say that you can see now that I'm moving into Blender and I'm modeling the Game Boy SP. So I've I've also imported my models that I made in Paint 3D into Blender. But for now I'm just working on the Game Boy. And I'm keeping it very simple. I'm not going for like 100% realism because that's not really the point of this picture. It's, I mean, you can tell it's a Game Boy SP. I don't need to make it perfect. But yeah, just keeping it simple, starting with the cubes for the main shape and then adding a few like bevels to make sure it's not too cubish. And then what you'll see in a bit is once I finished modeling the Game Boy, I move on to adjusting the models that I made in Paint 3D, and I do a thing called remeshing, which is a tool in the sculpting tools in Blender, where if you grab two intersecting models and you join them and use remesh, the models themselves will like fuse together, and then I can use that to like stitch together the parts of the model that were originally separated. Okay, so yep, back to my Pokemon story. Okay, so the moment this art piece depicts, how do I begin to describe it? If you don't know anything about Pokemon, or if you don't know anything about Pokemon history, I suppose, long story short, there is a Pokemon called Mew. And this Pokemon Mew, it was originally, way back in 1996, only a rumor. There was no evidence that it actually existed, and there was no anime or manga or anything else that could prove its existence. But then it was discovered to be real. This Pokemon wasn't just a rumor, it actually existed. Then it was distributed to players at a handful of exclusive real-life events. So it would be events where like you would go to, I don't know, a Toys R Us or something, and you'd bring your Game Boy and they would trade you the Pokemon. If you couldn't get to one of these real life events, then too bad. There's no other way to get this rare Pokemon, which sucks for most people. It sucks for people like me. Mew is so cute and alluring, and I wanted one for my Yellow game. But I didn't live in Tokyo or New York City or whatever, so people like me were kind of out of options. But then, in the early 2000s, there was actually an exploit discovered in the first generation of Pokemon games that allowed you to get Mew. It's a glitch in the game that on paper, it sounds so completely absurd. Like you read how you do the glitch and it sounds fake. Especially back then, in a time before video sharing or photo sharing even really existed. There was no way to prove that this glitch actually worked. So if you're gonna go to all the effort to try this glitch, you're basically just putting your fate in the hands of online strangers. Now, back in my world, we're now at 2006 in my story. Whenever I'd go on the computer, I would go on these Pokemon fan sites and read them front to back. I loved them. I can still remember so clearly my favorites were Mew's Hangout, The Cave of Dragonflies, and TRS Rockin'. All of these sites from my memory had extensive sections about the Mew glitch and how to perform it, but I just couldn't really comprehend the steps that you needed to take to execute it. Even though I would read these pages over and over, I just think in my brain there was like something missing. But fear not, because around this same time, I learned about the website YouTube. There was nothing like it before then, at least not to my 10-year-old knowledge. It just felt like this magical website where you could search for any kind of video you could ever possibly wish for. And I immediately became obsessed with it. And one of the first thoughts I had when I was browsing YouTube as a kid was, I wonder if I can find a video of someone performing the glitch. And that's exactly what I found. I memorized the video, then I got my new yellow save file to the right point to do it, and I started going through the steps. I started going through them very, very carefully. My heart was racing for some reason. I was so nervous. And then I remember I got to this final step where the pause menu pops up automatically and my heart just stopped. And I closed the pause menu and Mew appeared and I caught it. I finally had a Mew in my save file. I was screaming. I don't think I'd ever felt joy like that before. And I don't even care about what that says about me and my childhood. And I think my happiness in this moment, it was more than just because I'd got this Pokemon. It's like I describe this moment as the first time the internet crossed over into my real life in a really meaningful way. My experience with Pokemon, like I said, it had been so insular up until that point. I didn't really have anyone in my real life who liked it as much as me. But online, I found so many cool, creative people who loved it. And the online community at the time brought something special to my game. Like this Mew traveled through space and time to be in my cartridge. It genuinely felt like magic. It was such a special moment for me that I have this super cute diary entry that I did on the day that I did this glitch, which I'm so happy I have this. Like it really just encapsulates the pure joy that I felt in this moment. And this is probably why Pikachu and Mew are my two favorite Pokemon, which it always feels so lame to say, like, okay, the two most popular are your favorites, okay, but as you've come to learn from my story, I have a very valid reason. Alright, so back to the art piece. Now I'm in the stages of finishing it up. I'm setting up the lights in Blender, and I was struggling quite a bit with like deciding what background I wanted to do. I was experimenting with different real photos that I've taken, and then because I was struggling so much with the background, it's making me think like, is the whole composition bad? But I just kept trying different things, and what I eventually ended up settling on was just blowing up the painting that I did and using that as the background, which, yeah, I like the result of. I think it looks good. I like how, it all ties together. Also, another thing I did was I rendered the Mew twice. So I rendered it as a separate image so that I could, when I take it into Procreate, I could try and make it like pop a bit more. So yeah, once I had the render done and I was happy with how that was looking, I then brought the image into Procreate to sort of do any final adjustments. I was like messing around with adding some stars, trying to decide if I wanted to draw anything else around it or add anything, but I think I didn't want it to get too muddy. I mean, in the final image, you can't even tell that the screenshot is like a painting, so I don't need to add more and more and more on top of it, I'm now gonna wrap up my Pokemon story, and you're going to see me finishing up this piece. Pokemon, it caused this ripple effect in my life where I started making digital art after being inspired by Pokemon fan sites. And, this led me to taking art seriously, which led me to discovering game design as a real career, which led me to where I am today. And I can't really imagine what my life would be like without these games. From that experience when I was a kid of Pokemon just really opening up my mind to all these new feelings that games can give you, it changed the way I see them, and it gave me inspiration to make art and make things that are similar to Pokemon. It's funny, like when you look at my games, like on the surface, they don't look similar to Pokemon at all. But I take a lot of inspiration from, especially with this first generation of Pokemon games, like the story behind how they were made is very inspiring to me, as someone who I've been working on my game Surf Club for 5 years now. I'm inspired by the fact that these games, they took 6 years and they were so personal. Like Pokemon Red and Green, Blue and Yellow, they really are just about the developers' experience growing up in Japan, a memory of Japan that doesn't exist anymore, and they wanted to capture that, like capture those memories. And that's like literally what my game is about, bro. Like I'm making the same game, it's just not Pokemon. It's like, but it's that same desire to put a part of myself like out there. And yeah, I'm just endlessly inspired by these games. I'm really grateful that I got to experience them as a kid and have them be so formative to me. So yeah, that's the end of my little art process and my story. Hopefully both sides of this video were entertaining and interesting, and yeah, happy 30th birthday to Pokemon and me. Thank you so much again, and I'll be back soon with a new video of some sort. Bye!